So we start off crocheting with a slip knot. And so there's a few different ways on how to do these, but I'm going to show you one way that I use. And so I put the yarn over my hand, and there's a cut end and an end that's attached to the ball. So that goes like that. And then so we're going to forget about this cut end. We're going to use the end that's attached to the ball. So we're going to wrap that around your hand and place that on your hand. So this bit is towards the fingers. This is important. Otherwise, it will fall to bits from experience. Okay, so that's what it looks like. It's wrapped around your hand once, lying like that over the palm. Okay, and you can see I'm just holding this in my hand here just so it stays. Now flip your hand over and get this bit. This is the bit that's attached to the ball, the end that's attached to the ball. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop it under the piece of yarn that's wrapped around your hand. So, and this, the way that we do this is important too. So I'll show you twice. So put the yarn onto the palm, no, not the palm, maybe the wrist end of your hand. And we're going to slip that under this bit of yarn so that this loop is pointing towards your fingertips. Okay, I'm going to show you that again. So I've got the yarn wrapped around the hand like that. This bit here, the bit that's attached to the ball, is on the fingers side of the first bit. And then when we get on this side, get the yarn that's attached to the ball, bring it towards your wrist, and then we're going to loop it under the yarn that's wrapped around your hand like that. So this loop is pointing out. And we're actually going to, this loop here is what is the loop, is the crochet, is where the crochet hook goes. So let's just put the crochet hook through there. And then if you've got all the bits in the right order, pull that tight, and there you go. That is the slip knot. And the way to check that the slip knot is right is that if you pull on the end that's attached to the ball, it makes it smaller and bigger, which is what we want. Otherwise, you run out of yarn really quickly because that's the other end. Okay, so that's the first bit. We've done a slip knot. Now we're just going to do a couple of chain stitches, and chain stitches are it makes a foundation chain, but these stitches are like the basis of all of the other crochet stitches. So they're always a good one to start with. So how to hold your crochet hook in yarn, that is going to be totally up to you. And you'll probably find that you'll try different things, and then just one day it will feel comfortable. So just stick with it. Try different things, experiment. There's no right or wrong way to hold a crochet hook and yarn. And I love seeing the different ways that people crochet. It's unique and different, and yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so we've got the slip knot. Here it is on the crochet hook. So how tight should that, like how big should this loop be? So I like to think, this is kind of my guide, my starting guide, is that I can fit a finger in there. So I can fit, so the loop is on the fattest part of the crochet hook. It's always important to have it on the fattest part of the crochet hook. And there's a little bit of a gap. You don't want that too tight, because otherwise your stitch is going to be too tight, and then it's going to be too hard to crochet into them. So allow a little finger under, a finger can fit into there. Okay, so now we're going to actually do some crocheting. So this is how we do a crochet, how we do a chain stitch. And just when you're crocheting, something to think of and just be aware of, as the yarn is always away from you. So it's at the back of what you're doing. So just keep that so it's there. And when we wrap the yarn around the hook, we always go from back to front. We're going to do that now, because that's the first part of doing a chain stitch. So yarn over, so wrap the yarn around the hook from that. And then we're going to pull that through the loop that's already on the hook. So just like that. So I'm going to pull that out and show you that again. So you can see. So I've got one loop on the hook. I've got a little gap there, not too big. Then wrap the yarn around the hook. So back to front. And then pull what we've just wrapped the yarn over through the other loop on the hook. And so you can do it this way by, like, I'm holding onto the knot of the slip knot and pulling that through. Another way you can do it, rewind. So yarn over, back to front, is you can get your fingers and just pull it over like that as well. So what should we have happening here? So a few different things can happen here. How it looks. They're all right, but we can kind of just do some modifications so your chain stitches look right. Not really modifications, just kind of how we deal with them. So if your stitch is looking kind of flat and pretzel-ish, what you do is kind of just give it a little, bring those two outside bits of the pretzel in, and then you'll see you've got a V. And so that V is like on every crochet stitch. So 2 legs of the V, and then at the back, there's this knobbly bit. So there's the yarn going away, connecting to the ball. There's a knobbly bit here, and there's 2 legs of the V. So let's do another couple of chain stitches. So yarn over the hook. So always keeping your yarn at the back and always going from back to front. And how I hold it, I actually hold on to the last stitch I did. So yarn over and then pull that yarn over through the other loop, the loop on the hook. So like that. And just give your stitch, just hold on to it and make it look more V-ish. So you've got the V on top, the knobbly bit is at the back. And remember, if your stitches are looking kind of pretzel-ish, you see these outside loops. If it's back to front, it'll look like that. This is the knobbly bit going through the middle. So you can even hold on to that and then pull the sides like that. So knobbly bit's the back. Just turn that around. You got your V's at the front like that. Knobbly bits at the back. So yarn over, back to front, and then pull the yarn through the hook like that. Let's do 2 more. So yarn over, back to front, pull the yarn over through the loop on the hook. So remember just to get the V happening on your stitches like that. Knobbly bits at the back. There's the V. And let's do 1 more. Yarn over from back to front and pull that through the loop on the hook. So this is what we've got. So now we're going to count our foundation stitches. And that is what we've just done is essentially casting on if you're using the knitting terminology. But in terms of crocheting, it's doing the foundation chain. But it's kind of getting started, which is what casting on is, making the initial stitches. So when we count crochet stitches, we count the V. So look for the 2 legs of the V. So we've got 1 here. There's another one here. So that's 2. Another one here is 3. Another one here is 4. And another one here is 5. So there you go. So now you know how to actually start your crocheting, how to cast on. So we've removed that problem. And the more you do it, the easier it will become, and will just eventually, the more you crochet, it'll become second nature. But this video is always here for you to watch. So that's good to know. Okay, so the third problem. So our first problem was that it's frustrating and fiddly, and we talked about using big yarn, big hook, and having some really good detailed video tutorials to watch. The second problem was not knowing how to start and not knowing how to cast on. And so we've gone through how to do a slip knot, how to do a chain stitch, and then how to count those stitches. So you've got something to start to work with. And our third problem, and this is more once you've started crocheting, but definitely during the learning stage, is your edges aren't straight. And this is common. This is very common. And so there's 2 main ways that we deal with this. And one is to use stitch markers. And we put these in the first stitch and the last stitch of the row. And so you always know that edge stitch, because one of the reasons why the edges aren't straight is because it does get a little bit difficult to know which is the first stitch and which is the second stitch. And I'm going to show you how to use that. We're going to do a couple of rows. And like I said at the start, if you've got questions, just pop them into the comments. Okay, and then so there's another thing we can do as well, and I'm going to show you this as well, is to always make sure you turn your crochet the same way. So when you get to the end of the row, we turn. And so just get into the habit of turning the same way. It doesn't matter which way, whichever way works best for you. But yeah, just turn the same way. And then you get a nice, that combined with the stitch markers gives you a nice even edge. So let's do some more crocheting. So I'm just going to start off. We're just going to do double crochet stitches because they're nice and easy. So put these stitch markers to the side for now. And I will show you how to do a double crochet stitch. So what happens when we crochet is, so the foundation chain, the V's go down the bottom. So it's crocheting is three-dimensional. So the V's are facing this way. So there they are. So turn them on their side, the V is on the side. So what happens is we do a crochet row. So the top of the row will sit at about here. So where the yarn is. And you can see, I just need a little bit of water. I can feel a frog in my throat. You can see we need to get to the, excuse me. We need to get to the top of that row. So we need to get from here up to here. And how we do that is with a turning chain. The number of stitches in the turning chain varies depending on the row, and your crochet pattern will tell you that. More water. So we're going to do a double crochet stitch. So it has one chain. So we've been doing chains exactly the same stitch, but we're going to do one just to get us up here. So yarn over and pull the yarn through the hook. Just like that. So you can see now, here's our foundation chain. We've gone up the side and now we're ready to do our row and come across here. Okay, so when we crochet, we put the hook through the stitch on the row below. And so because we're working into the foundation chain, we're going to be putting the hook through the knobbly bit of the foundation chain. So here's our V. I just turn that around and there's the knobbly bit at the back. So just ignoring this turning chain, it's on the side. We're not going to do anything with it. It gets us up to the top of the row and that's about it. It doesn't count as a stitch, although some patterns will tell you that it does. I don't generally do that when I'm writing crochet patterns, because I think it just looks better when it's done like that. But anyhow, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's do a double crochet stitch. So first thing to do is put the yarn through the knobbly bit, and the hook always goes away from you when you're doing that. So hook goes into the stitch below, which for this one is the knobbly bit. So it goes away from you. Like I said before, make sure the yarn is always at the back. And then we yarn over, so put the yarn from back to front over the hook and we pull that through the stitch below. So like that. Okay, are you with me? Now we yarn over again. So that's the first part of the stitch. So yarn over again and we pull that through the 2 loops on the hook. So just like that. I'm going to pull that out and show you that again. Okay, so here's my knobbly bit. There's my V. There's my knobbly bit. So hook goes through the knobbly bit. So I've done that. Yarn over the hook, always going from back to front, and pull that yarn over out of the stitch below. So out of the knobbly bit like that. You've now got 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over always going back to front. So back to front and pull that yarn over through the 2 loops on your hook. So I'm holding the crochet ring just down here, just below the stitches, which makes it a bit easier to control. So pull that through there. And so what we can see here is we've done the foundation. Here's our foundation chain. Here's our turning chain going up the side, and we've done our first stitch. So this is the top of the first row, which will eventually come across here. So we're going to mark that. And how do you know where to put the stitch marker? So you see there's a loop on the hook, and coming down and around that is this loop here. And you can see it's a V. It's got 2 legs like that. And so we put the stitch marker around both legs of that V. There you go. So just like that. And we know that this is the first, this is the end of the row, the first stitch of the row. So we know that when we come to doing the next row, that's where the hook goes. That'll be the last one. But anyhow, we're not there yet. So let's do some more double crochet stitches. Okay, so find the next stitch. So here's our foundation chain. Here's the V. I turn that around. There's a knobbly bit here. So that's where the hook's going. So put the hook through the stitch below, through the knobbly bit. Yarn over the hook like that, always going from back to front, and pull that yarn over back out. So we've now got 2 loops on the hook. I'm going to do that again. Yarn over, back to front, and pull that yarn over through the 2 loops on the hook like that. And so we've done another double crochet stitch. So that's how it's looking. And when you're crocheting, always make sure you bring your hook, not the hook, bring the loop back up to the thickest part of the hook. And you should always have a bit of a gap around there. You don't want this to be really tight. If it's really tight, it gets a bit hard to maneuver, and then your stitches are hard to get the hook into. So leave it, so there's a bit of a gap under there. So now I've pulled everything a bit too tight. My stitch is looking a bit tight. That's okay. Let's do another double crochet. We're going to do another 3. So we'll do 5 total. So find the next stitch. So here's the V, knobbly bits at the back. Put the hook into the stitch below, yarn over, back to front, and pull the yarn over back out of the stitch below. Now we've got 2 loops on our hook. So yarn over and go through the 2 loops. And let's do that again. Let's find the next stitch. So here's my next V. There's the knobbly bit. So put the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, and pull that yarn over back out of the stitch below. Now I've got 2 loops on your hook. So yarn over and pull that through the 2 loops. And there's one more to do. So there's our V, there's the knobbly bit. That's where the hook is going. So put the hook through the stitch below, yarn over, pull that back out, the 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and through those last 2 loops. And because that's the last stitch, we're going to put a stitch marker through it as well. So same as what we did at the start of the row. There's the loop going around the hook, and then you can see going around that is a V. So there's the 2 legs of our V. That's our stitch, and we put the stitch marker around both of those. Oh, so there you go. We've done a row, and now we get to that. So remember when I said with getting straight edges on your crochet ring, we'll use the stitch markers, which I've just shown you how to do. But then we always turn the same way. So there's 2 ways you can turn. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And that's that way. So just by getting the start of the row and taking that to the left, checking my direction. So getting the start of the row, taking it from being on the right to the left, and then we'll crochet across here. Or alternatively, you can go the other way. So instead of going across the top, kind of goes behind like that. And the reason why if you do the same way every single time, so each way will make the edge look a little bit different. So you do it the same way every time and then you get a nice consistent edge. So I always turn this way. So I'm going to do it like that so I don't confuse myself. Okay, so let's do the second row. So I'll really show you how these stitch markers work and how to move them up, because we keep moving them up and up and up. Okay, so I know where the first and last stitches are. That's easy. But so our row 2 is going to come along here, something like this. So we need to get up to the top of that row. So same as what we did at the start of the first row, we're going to do a turning chain. And its purpose is just to get up to the top of the row. So yarn over, back to front, and pull the yarn through the hook. So there's our turning chain. We're going to crochet along here. Okay, so doing the second row is a little bit different to doing the first row because we're not crocheting into the foundation chain. We're crocheting into these stitches that we did back here. So we need to know where to put the hook to go into the stitches. And so it's easy for the first and last stitch because we've put the stitch marker around both of those, the legs of the V. But if you have a look along here, if you look, so it's 3-dimensional. If you look along here, you can see there's these V's and we're going to put the hook under both legs of the V. So that's commonly in crocheting, the hook goes under both legs of the V. So like that. Okay, so more double crochet stitches. So we start by putting the hook into the stitch below. So on the side, it's going to look like this. On the top, it's going to look like this. So here's the stitch below because it's marked. Put the hook through like that. So it always goes away from you and your yarn is always at the back of your crochet. We yarn over, so back to front, and pull that back out of the stitch below. So you've gone under 2 legs of the V, you've got to come back out under 2 legs of the V. So it's looking like that. Then yarn over and go through the 2 loops on the hook. So we've done the first stitch of the row. So we need to move this stitch marker up. And like we did before, look for they've got the loop around the hook, and then you can see around that loop is a V. It wraps around like that. Here's the 2 legs of the V. And put the stitch marker around both of those. Cool. And let's do some more double crochet stitches. So first we need to find our next stitch. And so it's here. It's this gap here. If you look at the top, it's looking for that next V. So there it is. So put the hook in there. It goes under both legs of the V. Yarn over and pull the yarn back out. You've got 2 loops on your hook. So yarn over and pull the yarn over through both of those loops. Hey Nanette, so glad you're joining us, and I'm so glad you've learned about the turning. That's great. So okay, next stitch is put the hook into the next stitch. So that's where it is here. We're going under both legs of the V like that. So into there, yarn over and pull the yarn back out, remembering to always keep the yarn at the back of your crocheting. Yarn over and pull it through the 2 loops on the hook. And we're going to do that again. Find the next stitch. Here we go. It's under both legs of the V. Put the hook through there. So under both legs of the V, yarn over and pull that back out. There you go. Yarn over and pull that through both loops on the hook. And we've just got to our last stitch, and we've got the stitch marker around it. So it makes it easy to know where the hook's going to go. So put the hook into there. So under both legs of that V, yarn over, pull that back out of the stitch below. Through the 2 loops. So there we go. And of course, we've done the last stitch of the row. We need to move the stitch marker up. So pull that out. Here's the loop around the hook. We're looking for the V that goes around that and put the stitch marker under there. So there are different kinds of stitch markers, and I really love using the locking ones, the ones that lock into like that, because they don't come loose. There are split ones that you kind of just, they've got a little split in them and you kind of feed them around. But they do sometimes come loose. So I really love these. And one thing I found, so I love the clover stitch markers. I've bought cheaper ones before from eBay and they just break. They were really brittle plastic. So I'd do that and then fall to bits in my hand. So that's why I love the clover ones. I've never broken a clover stitch marker. So like we said before about turning, always turn the same way. So I always go this way and you will find what works best for you. But that's, so yeah, so that's how to get straight edges. That's how to do kind of the basic crochet stitches and get started. So that's the 3 problems that we've overcome. So to make it nice and easy for you to learn to crochet. So have you got questions for me? Is there something else you'd like me to show you or show you something again? Pop them in the comments now. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to go back over the 3 common problems. The first one is that it's frustrating and fiddly. And if you're using kind of what I call normal size yarn, normal size crochet hook, it can be, if you don't know what you're doing, it can be hard to maneuver, it can be hard to see. So use a big yarn and a big crochet hook. And use a yarn that feels nice and a crochet hook that's nice and light and feels nice too, because it'll make your crocheting so much more enjoyable. And then you get find some detailed video tutorials because you can watch these over and over again. You can stop them, you can go back, you can rewatch. Like I said, with the Homelea Lass ones, you can actually slow it down if you want to. So you can kind of make it slower or faster, which is always funny to watch. So our second problem when learning to crochet is you don't know how to start or cast on. And I took you through how to do a foundation chain, how to do this initial slip knot, and then how to do that foundation chain, which gets you started. And then the third problem is how to get edges that are straight. So commonly it's you can kind of, the crocheting grows or it grows in like this. And so commonly what that is it can be difficult to find these edge stitches. So we use the stitch marker. So sometimes people will kind of maybe put an extra stitch in here or stop back here because it can be hard to see. So we use those stitch markers so we know exactly where the edges are, and then always turn the same way so you get a nice consistent edge, which then looks more even. And the other thing, the more you crochet, your tension is going to become more even, which will make your crocheting look a bit better. And that's just something that comes with practice. You will find your groove. And the thing I love with wool is it's elastic. So you can give it a bit of a jiggle and you can improve how it looks and make it look a bit better. So yeah, sometimes with tension, sometimes when you start out, you can be a bit tight and a bit, you don't really know what you're doing. And so things are new. And even now when I start a new project, sometimes this happens, a new pattern. So your foundation chain is tight. And then as you do a few rows and you're like, yeah, I can do this. And you kind of relax into it and you get looser on these further rows. So as you relax, you get looser and then your crocheting can start to look like this. And that's just tension, happens to all of us. I love wool because it's elastic and you give it a bit of a jiggle and it will look better. But the more you crochet, the more even your tension becomes.